My name is Rose Martinez, and I'm 54 years old. For over 2 decades, I've been a single mother who believed that unconditional love and endless sacrifice were the foundations of raising a good child. I worked double shifts, skipped promotions, and put every dream on hold to give my daughter Emma the best life possible. She was my world, my pride, my greatest accomplishment. I trusted her completely, never questioning her loyalty or love. That trust felt unbreakable until the morning I forgot my passport and came home to retrieve it. What I discovered in those few minutes would shatter everything I believed about motherhood sacrifice and the daughter I thought I knew. Before I share what happened next, let me know where you're watching from, and please hit that like button and subscribe for more real stories that matter. Now let me take you back to that morning that changed everything. I had been working at Morrison Marketing for 12 years, climbing my way up from administrative assistant to account coordinator, and finally landing the position of account director just 6 months prior. The promotion had been a long time coming, and I felt proud knowing that all those years of dedication were finally paying off. My office overlooked the bustling streets of downtown Portland, Oregon, where I had built my life from scratch after becoming a single mother. Our house was a modest two-bedroom craftsman in the Selwood neighborhood that I had purchased 8 years ago after saving every penny I could. The mortgage payments were steep for my income, but owning that little house represented security and stability for Emma and me. The wooden floors creaked in all the right places. The kitchen window faced east to catch the morning sun, and the small backyard had enough space for the vegetable garden I had always dreamed of planting but never found time to maintain. Emma was 23 now, fresh out of Portland State University, with a degree in communications. She had moved back home after graduation, which seemed like a practical decision while she searched for her first real job. The arrangement worked well for both of us. She helped with household expenses by contributing $200 a month from her part-time retail job, and I enjoyed having her company after years of coming home to an empty house. My mind often drifted back to those early years when Emma was just 3 years old and her father decided our family was too much responsibility. David had simply packed his clothes one Tuesday morning while Emma was at daycare and left a note saying he needed to find himself. I never heard from him again, not even a birthday card for Emma or a child support payment. Those first few years were the hardest of my life. I remember working at a coffee shop during the day while Emma was in daycare, then rushing to pick her up and taking her with me to my evening job, cleaning offices downtown. She would curl up on the couch in the break room with her coloring books and stuffed rabbit while I vacuumed and emptied trash bins. Some nights we wouldn't get home until after 10 o'clock, and I would carry her sleeping form up to her bed, wondering if I was doing enough, if I was being a good mother. When opportunities for advancement came up at various jobs, I often had to decline because they required travel or longer hours that would interfere with Emma's schedule. I watched colleagues get promoted while I stayed in the same positions, telling myself that being present for my daughter was more important than career advancement. Every sacrifice felt worth it when I saw Emma's report cards filled with A grades, or when she would hug me tight and tell me I was the best mum in the world. Emma had grown into everything I had hoped for. She was intelligent, thoughtful, and seemed genuinely appreciative of everything I had done for her. She would often tell her friends how hard her mother worked and how grateful she was to have such a dedicated parent. These moments filled my heart with warmth and validated every difficult choice I had made along the way. The Seattle account was the biggest opportunity of my career. Morrison Marketing had been competing for months to land the Patterson Industries contract, and somehow I had been chosen to lead the presentation team. The client meeting was scheduled for Thursday morning, and if we secured this account, it would mean a significant bonus and likely another promotion. I had spent weeks preparing, researching every detail about Patterson Industries and crafting what I believed was a winning proposal. Tuesday evening, as I was packing my overnight bag for the Seattle trip, Emma knocked on my bedroom door. She leaned against the doorframe with a warm smile and offered to drive me to the airport in the morning. The gesture touched me deeply because I knew she would have to take time off from her retail job to do this favor. We talked about my presentation while I folded clothes into my suitcase, and she listened with genuine interest as I explained the marketing strategy I had developed. Her enthusiasm for my success made me feel proud and supported. Wednesday morning arrived with typical Pacific Northwest drizzle coating the windows of our house. Emma was already in the kitchen making coffee when I came downstairs with my luggage. She had prepared my favorite breakfast of whole wheat toast with avocado and a perfectly poached egg. We sat at the small kitchen table, discussing the day ahead, while rain drummed softly against the glass. The drive to Portland International Airport took about 40 minutes in Emma's reliable Honda Civic. We talked about her job search and the few interviews she had scheduled for the following week. She mentioned being excited about a marketing position at a local non-profit organization that seemed like a perfect fit for her degree and interests. I felt optimistic about her future and proud of how mature and focused she had become. Our conversation flowed easily as we navigated through morning traffic. Emma asked thoughtful questions about my presentation and offered suggestions that demonstrated her understanding of marketing concepts from her college courses. I appreciated having someone who could engage with my work on an intellectual level, and it felt wonderful to share this important moment with my daughter. When we arrived at the departure terminal, Emma helped me retrieve my luggage from the trunk and gave me an encouraging hug. She wished me luck with the presentation and promised to keep her phone on in case I wanted to call and share how everything went. As I walked toward the entrance, I felt grateful for her support and excited about the opportunity ahead. I was standing in the check-in line reaching for my documents when my heart sank. My passport was not in my purse where I always kept it. I searched through every compartment twice, then dumped the entire contents onto a nearby chair. No passport. The sinking feeling in my stomach grew as I realized I must have left it on my bedroom dresser where I had placed it while packing the night before. Emma had already left the airport and was probably halfway to her job by now. I called her cell phone, but it went straight to voicemail. Rather than panic, I decided to take a taxi home to retrieve the passport myself. The round trip would take about 2 hours, but my flight wasn't scheduled to depart until 11:30, which left me with just enough time if traffic cooperated. The taxi ride back to Selwood felt longer than usual, as I worried about missing my flight and disappointing my team. I called my colleague Marcus to explain the situation, and he assured me that they would delay the departure until I could join them on a later flight if necessary. His understanding helped calm my nerves, but I still felt frustrated with myself for such a careless mistake. As the taxi pulled into my driveway, I was surprised to see Emma's Honda parked in the garage. I had expected her to be at work by now, but perhaps she had decided to come home before her shift started. I paid the driver and hurried toward the front door keys already in hand as I planned the fastest route to my bedroom and back to the airport. The moment I opened the front door, I could hear voices coming from the living room. Emma was speaking in a tone that sounded more serious than her usual casual conversation. I assumed she was on the phone with a potential employer, or perhaps discussing something important with a friend. Not wanting to interrupt what might be an important call, I decided to slip quietly upstairs to retrieve my passport. As I moved toward the staircase, I caught fragments of the conversation drifting from the living room. Emma mentioned something about timing and waiting for the right moment. Her voice carried a note of excitement mixed with nervousness that made me pause. Then I heard my own name spoken in a context that made my blood run cold. I froze on the third step of our wooden staircase, my hand gripping the banister as Emma's voice became clearer. She wasn't alone, and she wasn't on the phone. There was definitely another person in our living room, someone whose voice I didn't immediately recognize. The male voice was deeper, older than Emma's college friends, and carried a confidence that suggested he was comfortable in our home. Curiosity overrode my desire to respect Emma's privacy, and I found myself moving more carefully up the stairs to avoid the creaky spots I had memorized over the years. From the landing, I could hear their conversation more distinctly, and what I heard made my stomach drop with a sickening realization. The male voice belonged to Tyler, Emma's boyfriend, whom she had mentioned, but whom I had never met. She had been dating him for about 3 months, though she had been vague about the details of their relationship. Now I understood why she had been secretive about him. Emma's voice carried a tone I had never heard before, cold and calculating as she discussed what she called her research into my financial situation. She spoke about my bank accounts with an accuracy that terrified me, mentioning specific amounts that I had never shared with anyone. My retirement savings, my emergency fund, even the small investment account I had started building for Emma's future, she knew about all of it. Tyler's voice encouraged her as she detailed how she had been observing my banking habits for months. She had memorized my computer passwords by watching me type them, had photographed important documents when I left them on the kitchen counter, and had even called the bank, pretending to be me, to verify account information. The systematic nature of her deception was breathtaking in its thoroughness. The conversation turned to their plan, and I listened in growing horror as Emma outlined their strategy. They would wait until I was safely in Seattle, then transfer the majority of my savings to Tyler's account. From there, they would withdraw the cash and disappear to California, where Tyler claimed to have connections who could help them start fresh with new identities. Emma spoke about the money as if it were rightfully hers, as if my years of saving and sacrifice had been nothing more than an inconvenience keeping her from the life she deserved. She calculated that between my savings accounts and the equity in the house, there would be enough money to support them for several years while they figured out their next moves. Tyler suggested they should move quickly because my return from Seattle would give them only a narrow window of opportunity. He had researched the best methods for transferring large amounts of money without triggering banking alerts, and he seemed confident that they could execute the plan without leaving traces that would lead back to them immediately. The most devastating part of the conversation was Emma's casual dismissal of our relationship. She described me as controlling and suffocating someone who had held her back from pursuing her real dreams. She talked about feeling trapped by my expectations and resentful of the gratitude I expected for my sacrifices. According to Emma, I had been manipulating her with guilt for years, using my single mother status to keep her emotionally dependent on me. Tyler validated these feelings, telling Emma that she deserved better than a life spent catering to her mother's needs and expectations. He painted me as a selfish woman who had used Emma's sense of obligation to maintain control over her choices. Their conversation revealed a narrative about our relationship that was completely foreign to my understanding of our bond. As I continued listening, Emma revealed that she had been planning this betrayal for over a year long before she even met Tyler. She had simply been waiting for the right opportunity and the right partner to help her execute the plan. Tyler was not the mastermind behind this scheme. He was simply the tool Emma needed to accomplish her goals. My legs felt weak as I absorbed the full scope of Emma's betrayal. I gripped the stair railing more tightly and forced myself to continue listening, knowing that I needed to understand every detail of their plan before deciding how to respond. The conversation below continued with Tyler asking specific questions about my travel schedule and banking routines. Emma provided him with detailed answers that demonstrated just how thoroughly she had been studying my habits. She knew that I always checked my accounts online every Sunday evening, which meant they would have almost a week before I discovered the theft. She had observed that I rarely used my phone for banking, preferring my laptop, which would give them additional time since I wouldn't receive immediate alerts about the transfers. Tyler asked about the house, and Emma explained that she had convinced me to add her name to the deed 2 years ago under the pretense of estate planning. She had presented it as a way to ensure the house would pass to her smoothly if anything happened to me, and I had agreed, because it seemed like responsible planning for her future. Now I realized it had been part of a long-term strategy to gain access to my assets. The discussion turned to their backup plans if the electronic transfers proved difficult. Emma had made copies of my important documents, including social security cards, insurance policies, and investment account information. Tyler suggested that if they couldn't access the money digitally, Emma could use her legal access to the house to take out a home equity loan or even sell the property outright. Emma laughed as she described how easy it had been to gain my trust regarding financial matters. She mentioned specific instances when I had shared information about bonuses or tax refunds, and how she had carefully filed away every detail for future use. The systematic nature of her deceptions was far more sophisticated than anything I could have imagined from my supposedly innocent daughter. Their conversation revealed that Tyler had a criminal background involving financial fraud, which explained his expertise in money laundering and identity theft. Emma seemed excited rather than concerned about his experience, viewing it as proof that their plan would succeed. She spoke about their future in California with the enthusiasm of someone planning a vacation, not someone destroying her mother's life and financial security. Tyler warned Emma that once they executed the plan, there would be no going back. He made it clear that she would have to completely cut ties with me and anyone else from her previous life. Emma's response chilled me to the bone. She said she had been emotionally detached from me for years, and that cutting contact would be a relief rather than a sacrifice. As their planning session continued, I realized that Emma viewed our entire relationship through a lens of resentment and entitlement that I had never suspected. She spoke about my sacrifices not as expressions of love, but as manipulative tactics designed to make her feel guilty and obligated. Every memory I cherished of our time together had been reinterpreted in her mind as evidence of my selfishness and control. The sound of Tyler's voice brought me back to the immediate situation as he urged Emma to act quickly. He reminded her that my flight to Seattle was scheduled to leave soon, and they needed to confirm my departure before beginning the transfers. Emma assured him that she would receive a text from me once I boarded the plane, at which point they would know they had a clear window for their operation. I realized that I was standing at a crossroads that would define the rest of my life. I could confront them immediately, but that might only force them to accelerate their timeline or find different methods to access my money. Alternatively, I could pretend ignorance while secretly protecting my assets and planning my own response. The latter option would require me to maintain a facade of normalcy while my heart was breaking. But it might be the only way to truly protect myself and hold them accountable for their intended crimes. Taking the deepest breath of my life, I made my decision. I would not let them know I had overheard their conversation. Instead, I would use their own deception against them, while I figured out the best way to protect myself and ensure they faced consequences for their planned betrayal. This required me to become an actress in my own home, pretending everything was normal while my world had been turned upside down. I quietly retrieved my passport from the bedroom dresser, taking a moment to compose myself in front of the mirror. My face looked pale and my hands were shaking slightly, but I needed to appear calm and unsuspecting when I went back downstairs. I practiced a normal expression and rehearsed casual conversation topics that would help me maintain the illusion that nothing had changed. Descending the stairs with deliberate footsteps to announce my presence, I called out cheerfully that I had found my passport and would be leaving for the airport again soon. The sudden silence from the living room was followed by rustling sounds, and Emma's voice calling back that she would be right there to say goodbye again. When I entered the living room, Emma was sitting on the sofa with a young man I had never seen before. Tyler appeared to be in his late 20s, with sandy brown hair and an easy smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Emma introduced him as her boyfriend, apologizing for not mentioning that he was visiting today. Her explanation sounded rehearsed, and I noticed the slight tremor in her voice that suggested nervousness. Tyler stood to shake my hand with what seemed like genuine politeness, but I detected something calculating in his gaze as he assessed me. He expressed interest in hearing about my marketing work and asked thoughtful questions about the Seattle presentation. His ability to engage in normal conversations while secretly planning to rob me was both impressive and terrifying. Emma seemed increasingly uncomfortable as our three-way conversation continued. She kept glancing at Tyler with an expression that seemed to be asking whether they should proceed with their plan, despite my unexpected return. I pretended not to notice these silent communications while internally strategizing my next moves. When Tyler mentioned that he should probably leave, I surprised them both by insisting he stay for coffee. I claimed that I wanted to get to know Emma's boyfriend better, especially since they seemed to be getting serious. This suggestion clearly flustered Emma, who began making excuses about Tyler needing to get to work. I announced that my meeting in Seattle had been postponed by one day, which meant I would be spending the rest of today at home. The look of alarm that passed between Emma and Tyler confirmed my suspicions about their timeline. They had been planning to execute their theft today, believing I would be safely out of state and unaware of their activities. Tyler left within 10 minutes of learning about my change in plans, making a hasty excuse about an appointment he had forgotten. Emma walked him to the door, and I could hear them having an urgent, whispered conversation on the front porch. When Emma returned to the living room, her demeanor had shifted from nervous to frustrated. I decided that a partial confrontation was necessary to gauge Emma's reaction and commitment to her planned betrayal. Rather than reveal everything I had overheard, I told her that I had heard portions of their conversation from upstairs and was concerned about what I had witnessed. Emma's response was immediate and defensive. She accused me of eavesdropping and violating her privacy, turning the conversation away from her actions and toward my supposed wrongdoing. When I pressed her about the nature of her discussion with Tyler, she became increasingly agitated and accused me of being controlling and suspicious. The argument that followed revealed the depth of Emma's resentment toward me in a way that was both shocking and heartbreaking. She accused me of using my sacrifices as weapons to control her choices and keep her emotionally dependent. According to Emma, every decision I had made as a single mother had been selfish rather than loving, designed to ensure her loyalty rather than her happiness. As our confrontation escalated, Emma's mask of pretended affection completely fell away. She told me that she had never asked for my sacrifices, and that I had used them to justify controlling every aspect of her life. She claimed that my expectations of gratitude were unreasonable, and that I had made her feel guilty for wanting independence and autonomy. The most devastating moment came when Emma looked directly into my eyes and told me that she had stopped loving me years ago, but had continued living with me because it was financially convenient. She said that every expression of affection, every thank you for my support, every moment of apparent closeness had been an act designed to maintain access to my resources while she planned her escape. The silence that followed Emma's confession felt like the loudest sound I had ever experienced. We stood facing each other in the living room, where I had read her bedtime stories, helped her with homework, and celebrated every milestone of her life. Now that same space felt like a courtroom where I was being judged and found guilty of crimes I never knew I had committed. I looked at my daughter, really looked at her, and tried to find some trace of the little girl who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms. or the teenager who would excitedly share stories about her school day. The woman standing before me was a stranger wearing Emma's face, someone who had been systematically planning my destruction while accepting my love and support. With a calmness that surprised even me, I told Emma that she was no longer welcome in my house. The words came out clearly and firmly, without the emotion I had expected to feel. She laughed, actually laughed, and reminded me that her name was on the deed, which meant I couldn't simply throw her out of her own home. I walked to the kitchen and picked up my phone, dialing my bank's customer service number, while Emma watched with growing concern. Speaking loudly enough for her to hear every word, I requested an immediate change to all my account passwords and asked to speak with someone about suspicious activity concerns. The representative assured me that my accounts would be secured within the hour. Next, I called my attorney, Margaret Schultz, who had helped me with the house purchase and various legal matters over the years. I explained that I needed to see her immediately about removing someone from my property deed and protecting my assets from potential theft. Margaret's voice became serious as she assured me that she could see me that afternoon. Emma's demeanor changed dramatically as she realized that her plans were crumbling. She began pleading with me to reconsider, claiming that her words had been spoken in anger and didn't reflect her true feelings. She insisted that Tyler had been influencing her thoughts and that she would never actually follow through with any plan to hurt me. I interrupted her pleas to inform her that I had heard enough of her conversation with Tyler to understand the full scope of their intended theft. Emma's face went white as she realized that her careful planning had been exposed. She tried to convince me that they had only been talking hypothetically, engaging in a fantasy, without any real intention of acting on their ideas. When Emma realized that her explanations weren't working, she shifted tactics and began attacking me again. She accused me of being vindictive and cruel, claiming that my reaction proved how controlling and manipulative I had always been. According to Emma, a truly loving mother would try to understand her daughter's feelings rather than immediately resorting to punishment. I explained to Emma that love without boundaries was not love at all, but enabling. I told her that by failing to hold her accountable for her choices and actions, I had apparently created someone who felt entitled to take whatever she wanted, without considering the consequences for others. My years of unconditional support had somehow produced a daughter who viewed my love as weakness to be exploited. Emma made one final attempt to salvage the situation by threatening to leave permanently if I went through with my plans to remove her from the house and secure my finances. She seemed to believe that the prospect of losing her would make me reconsider my position. Instead, her threat only reinforced my conviction that she had never valued our relationship beyond its financial benefits. I gave Emma 72 hours to pack her belongings and find alternative living arrangements. During that time, she would be welcome to take any personal items that belonged to her, but she would not have access to any financial resources or property that I had accumulated. The house keys would be changed, and her name would be removed from all legal documents as quickly as possible. Emma called Tyler from our landline phone, speaking in urgent tones about their situation and the need to accelerate their plans. I listened to her side of the conversation, which made it clear that they still intended to find a way to access my money, even if they had to modify their approach. This confirmed my decision to take immediate and comprehensive action to protect myself. That afternoon, I met with Margaret Schultz and began the process of undoing every legal connection between Emma and my assets. Margaret explained that because Emma's name had been added to the deed, willingly removing it would require her signature or a court order, but she was confident we could find a legal pathway to protect my interests. The next few weeks passed in a blur of legal appointments, bank meetings, and emotional processing that left me exhausted but determined. Margaret worked efficiently to secure my assets and explore options for removing Emma from the house deed. The bank implemented additional security measures that would alert me to any attempts to access my accounts, and I opened new accounts at a different institution as an extra precaution. Emma spent her final days in the house, alternating between angry outbursts and tearful apologies. She seemed unable to accept that her actions had consequences, or that our relationship could not simply return to its previous state after such a fundamental betrayal. Her attempts to manipulate my emotions became increasingly desperate as her departure deadline approached. Tyler made several attempts to contact me directly, sometimes calling the house and sometimes appearing at my workplace. His messages combined veiled threats with attempts to negotiate some sort of financial settlement that would compensate them for what he called Emma's lost inheritance. I documented every contact and forwarded the information to Margaret, who advised me to consider filing for a restraining order if the harassment continued. On Emma's last day in the house, she packed her belongings in silence while I worked in my home office. The sounds of her moving through rooms that had been her home for over 2 decades created a soundtrack of loss that was almost unbearable. Despite everything that had happened, watching my daughter leave felt like experiencing a death. She left without saying goodbye, loading her car while I was deliberately away running errands. When I returned that evening, I found her house key on the kitchen counter, along with a note that was equal parts accusatory and self-pitying. Emma blamed me for destroying our family and predicted that I would regret my actions when I realized how lonely my life would become without her. The silence in the house was overwhelming during those first weeks alone. Every familiar sound seemed amplified, from the refrigerator's hum to the settling noises the wooden floors made as the temperature changed throughout the day. I had grown so accustomed to Emma's presence that her absence felt like a physical wound that would not heal. I threw myself into work with an intensity that concerned my colleagues. The Seattle presentation had been rescheduled and went exceptionally well, leading to the contract I had worked so hard to secure. The success should have felt triumphant, but instead it felt hollow without anyone at home to share the good news with. Margaret successfully negotiated Emma's removal from the house deed by threatening to pursue criminal charges related to the planned theft. Faced with potential prosecution, Emma agreed to sign the necessary papers in exchange for my promise not to file a police report about her intended crimes. The legal resolution provided security, but no emotional satisfaction. 3 months after Emma left, I began seeing a counselor named Dr. Patricia Williams, who specialized in family trauma and relationship recovery. Dr. Williams helped me understand that Emma's behavior might have been developing for years without my awareness, and that my enabling patterns had potentially contributed to her sense of entitlement. Through counseling, I learned to recognize the signs of emotional manipulation that I had missed or dismissed in my relationship with Emma. Dr. Williams explained that my desire to be a loving, supportive mother had sometimes prevented me from setting appropriate boundaries or holding Emma accountable for her choices. This insight was painful, but necessary for my healing process. I joined a support group for parents who had experienced betrayal by adult children, and I discovered that my story was not unique. Other parents shared experiences of theft, manipulation, and emotional abuse by children they had loved and supported unconditionally. These stories were heartbreaking, but also helped me feel less isolated in my pain. 6 months after Emma left, I received a text message from her asking if we could meet for coffee to discuss our relationship. The message was carefully worded to sound remorseful, without actually admitting wrongdoing or accepting responsibility for her actions. She claimed to have learned important lessons about herself and wanted the opportunity to make amends. I spent several days considering her request before deciding to meet with her in a neutral public location. The coffee shop was busy enough to provide privacy through background noise, but public enough to ensure the conversation remained civil. I arrived early and chose a table near the window where I could see Emma approaching. Emma looked thinner and tired when she walked into the coffee shop 20 minutes late. She had always been punctual before, and I wondered if her tardiness was intentional or if her life had become more chaotic since leaving home. Her clothing was stylish, but showed signs of wear that suggested financial constraints. Our conversation began with Emma offering what sounded like a rehearsed apology that focused on her feelings rather than her actions. She explained that she had been confused and influenced by Tyler, who had filled her head with ideas about independence and self-determination that had distorted her thinking. She claimed to understand now that her plans had been wrong and hurtful. I listened to Emma's explanation without interrupting, but I noticed that she never directly acknowledged the systematic nature of her deception or the months of planning that had preceded her final betrayal. Her apology focused on emotions and influences rather than choices and actions, which suggested that she still did not fully understand the scope of what she had done. When I asked Emma about her current living situation, she admitted that life with Tyler had not been as wonderful as she had expected. They were sharing a small apartment with another couple, and Tyler's promised connections in California had not materialized. She was working at a restaurant and struggling to make ends meet on her limited income. Emma asked if there was any possibility of rebuilding our relationship, but her questions quickly turned to practical matters, like whether she could visit the house or if I would consider providing financial assistance for her education or career development. Even her attempts at reconciliation seemed to be motivated by her needs rather than genuine remorse. I told Emma that the daughter relationship was always open, but that rebuilding trust would require consistent demonstration of change over time, rather than words or promises. I explained that her actions had shown me that she viewed our relationship primarily as a source of financial and material support, and that any future connection would need to be based on mutual respect and genuine affection. Emma became defensive when I outlined these conditions, accusing me of being unforgiving and holding grudges. She seemed to believe that her apology should immediately restore our previous relationship, without any need for her to prove that her attitudes and behaviors had actually changed. This reaction reinforced my conviction that she still did not understand the depth of the damage she had caused. Our meeting ended with Emma leaving in frustration after I declined to offer immediate financial help or invite her back into my home. She accused me of being cold and vindictive, proving that she still viewed my boundaries as punishment rather than protection. I left the coffee shop feeling sad, but confident that I had made the right choice. Over the following months, Emma sent occasional messages that seemed designed to test my resolve rather than genuinely rebuild our relationship. She would share news about job interviews or mention financial difficulties in ways that seemed calculated to evoke my sympathy and support. I responded with brief, polite acknowledgements, but did not offer the assistance she was seeking. The first anniversary of Emma's departure passed with a mixture of sadness and relief. I had survived the most difficult year of my life and emerged stronger and more self-aware than I had been before. My work continued to flourish. I had developed meaningful friendships with people from my support group, and I had begun to envision a future that was fulfilling independent of my role as Emma's mother. Dr. Williams helped me understand that my healing process was not about forgetting or forgiving Emma's betrayal, but about accepting what had happened and choosing how to move forward. I learned that love could coexist with boundaries, and that protecting myself from further harm was not selfish or vindictive, but necessary for my well-being. I began volunteering with a local organization that provided support services for single mothers, sharing my story and helping other women navigate the challenges of raising children alone. This work gave me a sense of purpose that was independent of my relationship with Emma, and reminded me that my experiences, both positive and negative, could be valuable to others. The most important lesson I learned was that unconditional love does not mean accepting unconditional disrespect or abuse. Emma had taught me that some relationships are toxic, regardless of the history or emotional investment involved, and that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is establish boundaries that protect both people from further harm. Sometimes I wonder what might have happened if I had confronted Emma's entitlement and manipulation earlier in her life, or if I had required her to demonstrate appreciation for my sacrifices rather than simply accepting them as her due. These questions will never be answered, but they have helped me understand that love without accountability is not truly loving at all. Today, I live peacefully in the house I worked so hard to buy, surrounded by the security I created through my own efforts and determination. My relationship with Emma remains distant but civil, and I hold space for the possibility that she might one day develop genuine insight into her actions and their impact on others. Until then, I have learned to be content with the love and respect I show myself. The greatest gift from this painful experience has been the discovery of my own strength and worth, independent of my role as a mother. For 54 years, I defined myself primarily through my relationships and responsibilities to others, but now I understand that my value comes from within rather than from what I can provide or sacrifice for someone else. Have you ever found yourself in a situation where someone you loved and trusted completely betrayed that trust? How did you find the strength to establish boundaries and protect yourself? I would love to hear your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. Please like this video. If my story resonated with you, and subscribe for more real-life stories about overcoming adversity and finding strength in difficult times. Share this with anyone who might benefit from knowing they are not alone in their struggles with family relationships and betrayal. Thank you for listening to my story. And remember that sometimes the greatest act of love is learning to say no. Take care of yourselves and know that you deserve relationships built on respect and genuine affection.